Let's start with Game 4, Boston Celtics, Milwaukee Bucks. Celtics win 116-108. Series is tied 2-2. Al Horford coming out of the fucking crypt, 35 years old. Carried them for most of the game until Jason Tatum got his shit together. Dunked on Giannis. He hit him in the face a little bit, but just an unbelievable performance by him. And these last couple of games, I thought, with from the Bucks, you really felt, even though the Bucks won Game 3, you really felt Chris Middleton's absence down the stretch. What did we think of what do we think of this game, and what do we think of Al Horford, like the rejuvenation of Al Horford?
God, can we just say, I mean, the beginning of these playoffs, people had to be reminded that Al Horford was back on this team. Like, people felt like they were in a coma and woke up and he had never left. And it feels like he's never left. And you know what? As a Celtics hater,
yes,
I am
same.
actually and rooting for the Bucks for this whole postseason. I'm really, really happy to see what Al Horford. It's incredible.
Giannis dunked on Horford earlier in the game and got attacked for staring him down, which I always hate. Don't let guys stare each other down. It's fucking great. Let them trash talk. I love it. And who doesn't love it? It's fantastic. But anyway, his sister then later tweeted like, "Oh, I could tell by the look on Al's face right there that it was like a switch had flipped." I always love shit like that. And then later Al like praised God for basically, during the post game was like, it's all because of him. It's all because of God. I always love stuff like that because it's like, one, the idea that Al would have needed that. He needed somebody to be like kick sand in his face, like the proverbial 90-pound weakling of old, to like Hulk out and get to that level. And then I always love whenever anybody's like, "Oh, I had to praise God," because it's like God was like, "You know what? Fuck Giannis and the Bucks today. I don't like them. I'm going with my guy Al Horford." This is what happens in the playoffs, right? You always expect it. You always expect the superstars to come through, which is why Jason Tatum's struggles over the last couple games and even this game have been notable. But there's always going to be that random game where somebody Eddie House, Al Horford, some guy you didn't expect, was not on the radar at all, comes through and goes huge. And we're kind of waiting for that from the Bucks outside of Giannis. And they're going to need that in this home stretch of that playoff series. What do we make of Jason Tatum's struggles in this series?
I think that as much praise as we heaped on him for as well as he did in the Nets series, he's had a lot, like he's kind of come down to earth. Like it's kind of like, oh, so he's not just top 5 all the time. Okay. Yeah. We've been looking at him struggle, obviously, with facing a better roster, a better overall like superstar in Giannis, and the offense and the defense that was on display in the Brooklyn series. On the offensive side, his shots just aren't falling. Like even in this Game 4, people called it a rebound, but 30 something points on 24 shots is still it's a tough stat line when you're looking at it from an efficiency standpoint.
Absolutely. I mean, he came through in the fourth quarter when he started to really put it on. But up to that point, he was like 4 of 21, according to Kirk Goldsberry, through Game 3 up until about the third quarter of Game 4. At one point, like, he was 0 for 10 when Wes Matthews was his primary defender, which is listen, Wes Matthews is nice. I like Wes Matthews. He's a solid player. But for a player of Jason Tatum's caliber, it's not a thing that we thought would matter. And I think you're right. Like, we're just kind of seeing a difference in the physicality level. And it's we've watched Jason Tatum take a leap over these playoffs, and here's another obstacle that he's going to leap over. This kind of like very, very physical, because there's times watching this series where I'm like, holy shit. Like, they're letting this go, and I can't believe they're letting it go.
And I think absolutely that fans want Jason Tatum to be this superstar that we almost over celebrate his game winners, his big games. But to be the superstar that everyone is making him out to be, you have to be consistently carrying that team. This is the reason why they're the number 2 seed, is because they have a Jaylen Brown who can carry, and now Al Horford being the star of this past game. Like, we need to hear Jason Tatum's name more than we're hearing it now. And so, yeah, I think that's what's going to get to his next level. Can he consistently do this, or he can't just disappear as much as he is in this series?
I totally agree, but I think that the depth of the Celtics has really been on display. Like, we're talking about a game where Jaylen Brown, was in foul trouble and didn't play most of the fourth. Jason Tatum, we're talking about his struggles, but we're also talking about a game where Al Horford absolutely went crazy, and Marcus Smart, contributed 18 points of his own. So that's 50 points between Horford and Smart. So you're really seeing the role players pick up the slack for the superstars. And I remember when we had Chris Mannix on a couple of weeks ago to react to game 1 of the opening series, and Horford had a great game in performance in that game as well. And we asked him, like, is Horford going to be able to sustain this throughout the postseason, or are the wheels going to fall off at some point and leave Boston kind of exposed? And, now we're halfway through the second, and Horford's still making that noise. So, Mannix said that he wasn't worried about him, and, Horford's making him look good right now.
I've been watching the games with my 65-year-old white father-in-law. And he gave the perfect description on accent, just very naturally. We're watching the game. Al Horford was taking over, and he goes, Horford, solid player. Like, he is just... His game is so basic and straight up. The wheels can't fall off when it's just mid-ranges,
right, yeah,
and just being in the right spot. So, like, I'd bet on Horford for the rest of this postseason as far as they go.
Yeah, to your point about depth, Ryan, Derek White for the Celtics, like, in terms of playing defense, moving the ball, like making the right play, he was plus 18, only 11 points. 4 rebounds, 3 assists, but like just making the right play every time. And I think you contrast that with like some of the Bucks supporting staff, like Drew Holiday, his counting stats, like 16 points, 9 assists. That's great. Minus 23 plus minus, and just, 5 of 22 from the field. Makes decisions sometimes where you're like, I don't know that that's what Grayson Allen has appeared like unplayable at times. It's just, you're absolutely right, Ryan. Like, the depth around Giannis just needs to be, we just need more solid play. Bobby Portis is like hardly playing. Lopez has been solid, but they just need more. The Celtics depth is really showing right now. Let's move on to, Warriors Memphis game 4. A lot of talk around this series, a lot of narrative around this series, a lot of acrimony, a lot of toxicity. Golden State eked out the win, 101-98. Golden State didn't lead until the last 45 seconds of this game, to let you know what a very, very strange game it was. Steve Kerr tested positive for the novel coronavirus COVID-19 and went into health and safety protocols like minutes before the game. Mike Brown, who that day was announced as the new head coach of the Sacramento Kings, then got another promotion to head coach of the Golden State Warriors. Of course, no John Morant, whose knee injury, kind of vague knee injury with MRI results that are being hidden from the public, did not play. And again, Golden State goes on to win a 3-1 series lead. My takeaway from this game is, if Dylan Brooks had not been suspended, this series would be fucking over. Like, Dylan Brooks, he defensively, this guy will not let his opponent rest. Like, is such an active, chaotic defender. But this guy put in maybe the worst 6-minute stretch of basketball this playoffs, down the stretch of the game where it was like triple jab step, drive, kick the ball out of bounds, like a 3-pointer with like early in the shot clock, no extension on his arm, like the weirdest 3-point form where the ball sails completely over the rim, hits off the other side of the backboard. Just crazy shit from Dylan Brooks. He played 39 fucking minutes. And and the Warriors take it. I think he was the difference in the game. Like, the Warriors should give him the fucking game ball. What did we think of this game, fellas?
I mean, can more shit happen in a series? Like, truly, every 5 minutes, something new surfaces. But you're right. It was like watching Julian Newman play in the NBA with Dylan Brooks. It's funny. It's like, you know, I don't know if there was a pregame speech and they were like, we needed someone to step up, and Dylan Brooks like thought that was supposed to be him.
Oh, it's me. Right.
Yeah.
I'm stepping up. Okay.
But I mean, I was really surprised. I mean, the reason why I think the Grizzlies led most of that game was because, I mean, the Warriors shot horribly. They scored, 38 points?
Terrible.
Clay is not Clay. He hasn't been Clay this whole series. So, like, all that to only be leading by, 2 or 3 at the half. So it kind of just, it worked out the way it should have worked out. I thought a masterful Steph Curry ending there and Draymond. That flop, I'm sure that's going to be a major part of this conversation, but that flop was, it's the type of flop where I watch it and I learn something new every time on every replay. Truly hilarious, but truly an expert at the move.
No, CJ, you're so right, man. The Warriors came out of the gate shooting horribly, 0 for 15 from 3 until Otto Porter hits with 3.5 minutes before the half.
Yeah. Otto Porter, again, there's that thing where you're just looking for some guy that's gonna carry you for a stretch, and Otto Porter was that guy for this game.
You know, when you're 0 for 15, I'll let the ball boy carry me if he can get the shot in. But, you know, it was funny because watching Memphis lead the game the entire time, I was thinking about the conversation we had at the start of this series, where we were like, you know, these games are going to be close, but Golden State is going to win all of the close matchups. You know, there was the blowout in reaction to the John Morant injury in Game 3, but all the other games have been very closely contested. Memphis was able to eke out, you know, a victory in Game 2, but Games 1 and 4 were kind of those situations where we know Memphis is a good team, but we also know that Memphis is a young team. And, you know, we know exactly where Golden State has been. We know who they are, and they showed that in both of those games. And we said these are going to be close games that Memphis doesn't win any of them. And I think that it's played out that way. And I expected the gentleman's sweep that we called to come to fruition.
After the game, Taylor Jenkins, one of the most curious coaches in the NBA, he was, of course, curious about the play that the Grizzlies allege caused John Morant's injury. Talk about that in a second. But he said that he was curious to see what the last 2-minute report will say about Draymond Green's late contest on Jaren Jackson's 3, which I don't know if it was a shooting foul. I think you could make the argument that it was. All of which is to say, I think the Grizzlies remind me of the early 2000s Kings, in that the Kings were trying to unseat the Lakers, the great Kobe Shaq Lakers, right? And who can forget when Phil Jackson called Sacramento a cow town, and then the Kings fans responded with all the cowbells, and they made it one of the loudest arenas ever. But I felt like in retrospect, the Kings got so wrapped up in this narrative of the Lakers are the kings of the NBA, and we're the underdogs. Everybody is against us. The entire league is against us. The refs are against us, and we're just out here scrapping for anything we can get. And I feel like the Grizzlies got a little bit rattled by Kerr's the code talk, and I think they responded poorly to it. And I think they have gotten they're getting a little exposed in terms of their inexperience. And I think they got a little wrapped up in the whole narrative of them being the underdogs, everybody being against them. And everything that has happened after that has kind of not been great. The suggestion that Jordan Poole pulling on Ja's knee late in Game 3 is what caused Ja's knee injury, or exacerbated it. Of course, Ja has a history of right knee injuries, missed a number of games over the course of the regular season with a right knee injury, plays an extremely bruising, contact-laden style in which he is constantly like knifing towards the rim and taking contact and jumping over guys, had knocked knees seemingly earlier in the game, previous to the play that Taylor Jenkins references. I just think that, like, if you're going to seriously say that Jordan Poole caused that and do it in the casual tone of it doesn't match up. Like, if I'm saying this opposing player, on purpose reached down and injured my best player, then I'm doing it with so much anger, if that's legit, that I'm not even talking about basketball. I'm like, we need to call the police that this happened. Are you kidding me? Like, how? And it just is, it feels like they're trying to answer the gamesmanship of Kerr when he brought the code thing into it, which I didn't love. I don't love suggesting that a player tries to injure a player on purpose. I think that basically that never happens. Like, Bill Laimbeer aside, and maybe Bruce Bowen, I don't believe that there's ever been an NBA player that has on purpose gone out there trying to hurt. I think guys just get reckless. Maybe they lose their head for a second, but I don't think anybody is ever trying to hurt anybody. But like, not letting Dillon Brooks talk, like keeping him from the media for as long as they did, I think that made it seem like they had something to hide. Let Dillon just come out and say, "Hey, it's unfortunate that happened, and I'm saddened that happened." Go right back at Kerr when he says the code stuff and say, "Hey, we play hard." And I know that Taylor Jenkins did kind of say stuff like that, but like, go right back at him and say, "You have Draymond Green on your team. Like this is just, we're playing hard nosed. It got away from Dillon Brooks, and that's unfortunate. But the suggestion that we do anything untoward is kind of rich coming from a team that employs Draymond Green. Like, go hard at him there, but don't respond in this weird kind of sensitive way where you're hiding Brooks from the press, and then all of a sudden you're suggesting that Jordan Poole injured Ja Morant on purpose." It just has been this kind of weird flailing response, and I feel like it has exposed the Grizzlies a little bit mentally. Like, should be a learning experience for them.
Yeah. Can we just recap the context of if that was a supposed on-purpose attack on Ja Morant's knee, where it's like they're leading by, I forget how much they were up by.
They were up by, at that point. They were killing him at that point. Yeah.
They were killing him at that point. It's 1-1 early in the series, guys. If you're going to put a hit on Ja Morant, you're not going to have Jordan Poole do it. You're going to have some Russian dude off the bench in the movie version of the song.
Right, the movie.
And and then expect them to do some like legendary, the Drunken Master, like 5-point knee, tear 8 ligaments. It's impossible and unlikely. It was the beginning of that. It just started this domino effect of, like you said, the Grizzlies kind of exposing their inexperience to the game of it all, not just on the court. It's, hey, how do you respond in these post-game press conferences when a question of, sort of being baited? They fell for a lot of the bait. Taylor Jenkins, like Dillon Brooks, like, no, we're not going to have Dillon Brooks respond right away because we're this hard-nosed, scrappy team. We've been in the media. We've been doing everything right. It's like, no, guys, like, at the end of the day, just like, you didn't do it on purpose. No one did that. The code is, we don't hurt people in games. There wasn't a code established. You just don't injure people. So I just, the Grizzlies have been just straight up kind of weird. And I think it's them being young and somewhat immature and going like, no, this is the strategy. Let's just, we're this hard-nosed team that doesn't, we're not soft. And it's just at this point weird.
And furthermore, Dillon Brooks, 39 minutes. I guess Taylor Jenkins is saying, like, I'm supporting my guys. These are the guys that brought us here. Dillon, of course, being an important cog in that and in what we did, our success, this, particularly when Ja was out, and that stretch that we of winning that we did when Ja was out. But like, D'Anthony Melton played 9 minutes. I think Zaire Williams could have done some stuff for them. And you're talking about guys who are going to bolster you defensively and not make decisions that make you ask, like, does Dillon Brooks have money on this game going the other way? Like, it just feels like there were some buttons and levers that could have been pushed and thrown that didn't get going. Ryan, you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, when you're in this position, it's kind of all hands on deck, and I thought that they definitely could have employed more of their roster to try to, to get this game, because this was another situation, like I said before, where they were very close to getting this win. This was a winnable game for them, and just to be that far from the promised land, the proverbial promised land of the night, is just. When you look back at the tape, when you look back at the minutes, when you look back at the rotations, if you didn't empty the clip and to try to get that attainable victory, then I think there's always going to be a sense of regret there. So when this game is over and that regret already exists, when the series is over, I think they'll look back and they'll say, outside of that game 3, we weren't very far away. I think that's part of the immaturity. I think that's part of the experience that we always said was going to be really good for Memphis.
I should add that before the game, Dillon Brooks finally spoke to the press. It had been 5 or 6 days or something like that, and said, it's paraphrasing now, but if I could do it all over again, obviously, I would not have made that foul, and he feels bad about it. You can, whatever people, obviously Golden State fans are going to have an opinion about the sincerity of that, but that shouldn't have happened 5 days later. Have him meet the press right away. Take the fucking gas out of it. Deflate the tension around that, and don't let Steve Kerr rattle you by suggesting that you're a dirty squad. Go back at him, and that is maybe something they'll do for next time. Okay.
I think the waiting is what gives Golden State fans the right and the leeway to question the sincerity of it, because at this point it seems like someone just pushed him out onto the stage and said, no, you have to say it, as opposed to him just coming out and doing the right thing.
Yeah, it was just all around weird. But let's talk about Jokic and his second MVP. Philly fans are mad, and they're right. They are upset that Joel Embiid did not win an MVP award, despite being he would have been my pick for MVP. It's a different kind of case than the statistical case that you can make for Nikola Jokic. But I'll say this. Nikola Jokic's regular season, 27 points on 58% shooting, which is crazy, 33% from three-point range in 33 minutes. 27 points, 13 rebounds, basically 8 assists, steal and a half, 1 block a game. The advanced stats, as I'm sure everyone has heard, are incredible. But my kind of favorite thing about Jokic's MVP is that inherent in the case, and I've been watching Nuggets fans online do this for days, built into Jokic's case is a criticism of Nuggets players. It's man, Jokic is MVP, and you know why he's MVP? Because our fucking team sucks. These guys suck. Fuck these guys that we had. They were Jeff Green should have retired 3 years ago. Everybody else, terrible. Aaron Gordon, get him off my squad. It's just really funny to me. Do you agree with Jokic winning his second in a row MVP?
I am bored of this conversation. I won't talk about it. No, but it is let's talk, let's give this award at the end of the regular season. Because that is the great reminder to a lot of people. This is for the regular season. And the thing is, Embiid deserved it too. And they had to dig deep to give this award to Jokic. And I think just the main, general reaction is it's boring to give it to a player 2 years in a row. We've been wanting Embiid to be as good as he is, and he was this season with all that drama around him. And we're watching him, step up in these playoffs and be this Joel Embiid MVP player. And we're I think the big question is he going to be this way again? Is he going to continue to grow and just? That's what we're all nervous. We're all nervous that he won't be and that he won't get it. And then we'll talk back on 2022, the year Embiid deserved to be the MVP, and we didn't give it to him.
I got to give it up to Kendrick Perkins, because rarely do I have to give it up to Kendrick Perkins. But I thought Kendrick actually had a good point, which is he said today on Swagoon Perk, I don't know what the criteria for MVP is, no more, but I do know the story. I do know that story should matter, and nobody had a better story than Embiid this season. So The NBA very, very smartly has never defined what MVP means, right? So every year it is a discussion and a redefinition by various parties about what it means to be the MVP, right? I think you can make a very, like, obviously the statistical case, the winning case, the on court, off court, a case for Jokic is super strong. Like, he's great. You can watch him and you're like, he's great. He's a 7-foot Magic Johnson, like, who's also like an incredible low post player, who's also like the best passing big man of all time. For Joel Embiid, he is like the difference maker for the Sixers. He is doing it on both ends, defensively and offensively. He's one of the most devastating low post players that we have in the game. And more to the point, I just think the stuff that he's had to deal with the whole Ben Simmons drama, with what they're going to do in terms of with the James Harden drama that comes inherently with adding him to the mix, with his own injury struggles. We're watching him right now play through the kind of like, post-concussion symptoms, a shattered eye socket and a torn ligament in his thumb. And the history of injuries that he's had to deal with. And to your point, CJ, it's like, I worry that we won't get a chance to give it to him again.
Exactly.
Truly. Which is why I wanted to give it to him this year. I thought he was deserving. I thought he's had a great story. This is a guy who missed 2 years of the early part of his professional career with injuries. And I just feel like, are we going to have a chance to give it to him again? I don't know. And that's why I thought he was my MVP this season.
And if he ends his career without an MVP, just after a career of us calling him an MVP caliber player, I think we're going to regret that, especially when we look back at this back-to-back. Because even if Jokic had the statistically and numerically superior season, I think the fact that he is already the defending MVP, as you've said in different instances before, should make it harder to win the second one. To go back to back, you should be like head and shoulders the best. There should be no argument. That should be the only way you can win it. Otherwise, I think that they should divvy it out.
And people will say, okay, but Jokic's stats are actually better this year. Like, he had great, he was incredible the year before this, but he's actually even better now. To which I would say, Russell Westbrook was, the year he won it, when he averaged a triple-double, he was kind of better the second year. He was better the second year, and we didn't give it to him. So I just think that, like, all of this changes. It's all about, narrative is a bad word, but I think that it is all about narrative and the argument you make. And my argument for Joel Embiid was, he is an MVP level player. He is everything to the Philadelphia 76ers. He's had to deal with the kind of drama that Jokic has never had to deal with over his career, has had to battle his own body over the course of his career in a way that other players just haven't had to do. And he's great, and a warrior. And I wish he had won it. That's all.
Yeah. Did you guys see winning time in the finale? Did you guys see this?
Yes, I did see
the very factual, accurate winning time. There's that scene, and there's no spoilers. This happened, but they were, Kareem was the MVP of that series. But David Stern went up to Magic in the hallway and he goes, "Hey man, you played. This is your moment. If we can just make that part of the equation, whose moment is it?" And it's this season was Embiid's moment. You said narrative is a bad word. Maybe it's moment. It's like we were talking about Embiid this whole goddamn season. And plus the stats that were somewhat close to Jokic, I just think like that's enough. And I think that's what we just want going forward, is to just take account for stats, narrative, all aspects of what is going on in awarding these players. Because we've done it in the past. Let's just do it every season.
Here's Doc Rivers on Joel Embiid this morning, quote, "I don't know if I could have done more than he did this year. play without the second best player all year. His resume is great. I'm not taking anything away from Jokic either because he's a hell of a player. I do think this whole analytic-driven society world is out of control at times with some of the measures they use. Like, watch the dang game and decide is what I've always said. But at the end of the day, if Joel had won, which I thought he should have, there would have been criticism that way. If Giannis had won, only one guy could win, unfortunately. I'll just say also, the criticism of Jokic as you got to watch the games. I mean, you watch Jokic, he's fucking great. Yeah. And there's this like weird counter narrative where it's like, oh, only if you understand VORP can you understand like what Jokic. You watch him and it's like, oh, that guy's. The Nuggets don't score unless Jokic assists on it or scores himself. Like, anyway, I thought it should have been Embiid. It's unfortunate. Up next, John Hollinger. Second round of the NBA playoffs are in full swing, and it's Monday morning. Nikola Jokic has just been announced as the NBA MVP, his second straight MVP in a row. A lot of that discourse has centered on the importance of stats, in advanced stats in Nikola Jokic's campaign, and if you want to blame somebody for that, I've got no one better than the great John Hollinger, the inventor of PER, one of the great analysts in the modern history of the NBA. John, thank you for joining Takeline. It's great to have you here. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Super surprising games this weekend. I never in my life dreamed that Phoenix Dallas would be 2-2. Same with Philly Heat. I never thought that would be a 2-2 series with the injuries that Philly was dealing with throughout that series, with James Harden's seeming ongoing decline. What have been the big surprises that you've seen thus far in the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, probably Dallas being 2-2 is probably the biggest one. Just the way those first two games went, especially, it just looked like Phoenix had them completely outclassed. And then they've gone to some of this stuff that worked against Rudy Gobert, and they're finding it works against DeAndre Ayton too, where they put 5 people around the 3-point line. It's just really hard to help from there. So Phoenix's guards are better defensively than Utah's were, but it still really opens things up for not just Luka, but Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie to get in the paint and create problems. And you almost wonder if they've found kind of the new cheat code for the NBA and that a lot more teams are going to be doing this going forward.
You've seen people start talking about this, but like at some point, shouldn't the Suns just say, okay, Luka, go for 60 if you want? I remember like this is how teams used to play the old Nash Suns back during the playoffs. Go for 60 if you want, but we're going to stay home on all these 3-point shooters and not let them get off, because that is what is killing us. Do you expect Phoenix to do some version of that going forward?
It's a little hard. I mean, once you get a screen for Luka, you have to make a decision, right? And usually with Ayton, the decision is to have him play a drop. So now you're in a little more of a rotation situation where other guys can get involved. So it's an interesting quandary for the Suns. Personally, I like the idea of letting Luka go for 60 because I think he tends to burn himself out when he scores too much in the first half of games. We saw that certainly in game 2. So I like that idea from that perspective. And I do wonder if the Suns will lean more in that direction as this series goes on. But if you're doing that, you're probably asking your bigs to switch on him certainly more than they have, and that may result in them getting cooked too.
John, I had a question. So say hypothetically the Mavs take this series. I think everyone was kind of saying, oh, the Mavs are going to lose this series. So what do they got to do this summer? They got to go out and get a center. Say they make it past this series. Do you see the Mavs spending big on a center this summer?
Well, I don't see them spending big on a center either way because they can't. They're kind of locked into their salary structure. Yeah. Now, if they do a trade, they still have that Bertans contract clogging up their cap. So if they take that and a future pick and maybe trade for a center, that's a different discussion. But I do also wonder what type of center they would want, because I think the idea has always been, we'll get somebody who's a really great lob threat and we'll pair that guy with Luka. Or the alternative, we'll get a great pick and pop guy, Porzingis, and put that guy with Luka. And I think that, they're kind of going back toward the Porzingis model a little bit with how they're playing. They're just using Kleba in that role instead. So it is kind of interesting that they're tilting back toward just playing that perimeter model and not really having a rim runner next to Luka. I mean, Dwight Powell hasn't been playing that much in either of these two series. So it's an interesting decision for Dallas. I mean, I will say the other thing is we get all excited when these series are tied 2-2. Yeah. If you look historically, I mean, it usually, when the home team wins the first 4 games of a series, it way more often than not ends with the team with the better seed ends up advancing.
Well, speaking of that, let's talk about Philadelphia, Miami, another series that I never thought would have been 2-2. If Joel Embiid is healthy for that entire series, I'm surprised that it's 2-2. Considering he was out, I'm surprised that it was 2-2. But a lot of the discussion has to be about James Harden, who had a bounce back. I don't even know if you could. It's like calling Jesus coming out of the tomb after the 3 days a bounce back win for Jesus Christ, like on Easter Sunday. He would so Harden had a huge bounce back game, right?
Come on, this isn't like it's not DeAndre having 30, right? Come on.
We're surprised he scored 31.
I know, and he said after the game, well, my shots are falling. I think that's a good analysis of what happened. It's not like he was driving past guys with the kind of liquid quickness that he has shown in the past. He was hitting some really, really tough step back threes. He was so deep in his bag. It was really incredible. But what are you seeing in that series? And can we say that James Harden is back? Should we apologize? Should I sign the apology form that is going around on the internet for all the people who declare James Harden washed? Must I apologize in written format now?
He's like 30% washed. Right? He's not what he was.
Yeah.
But he still can help you win, right?
Yeah.
So, and the funny thing about that series, it's been make or miss league. I mean, writ large, every single game. The losing team, every single game is like, wow, we were like 8 for 43 from 3, huh? And meanwhile, yesterday, you had Harden who hit a lot of really difficult threes off the dribble, as you say, and that was a real difference for Philly. I do think Philadelphia can win this series. I think Embiid, the biggest story of the last 2 games to me is that Embiid has completely snuffed out Bam Adebayo's offensive role. And so it just puts so much pressure on Jimmy Butler to do everything offensively for Miami. So I think that puts Miami in a little bit of a difficult spot. I'm interested to see what happens in Game 5 when the home venue changes again. I'm really interested by this series now.
Hey, Sean, do you think this story coming out with Jokic this morning, do you think that affects the series at all in Embiid? Or, I mean, Embiid's playing great, but is there going to be a sort of a targeted comeback here?
Well, this isn't like Hakeem playing against David Robinson, right? He's not like, I'll show you, Dwayne Dedmon, I don't see as much of that. And I think Embiid probably, I think everyone sort of knew Jokic was going to win and Embiid was going to come in second. Yeah. So I don't think this is like some big shock either. It's hard for me to see it tilting things that way. But Embiid has been amazing regardless, right? So I just think he's a problem for Miami. And the other thing that makes him a problem is Miami loves to switch and put Bam on the perimeter guy, which once you do that, now you have, Jimmy Butler or Tyler Hero or somebody trying to guard Embiid. So they've been pretty good about giving enough help to make the entry passes hard, but it's still like you're in a bad position for rebounding. You pick up fouls. Like there's just a lot that goes on when you do that.
You mentioned the make or missness of it. Jimmy Butler was everything offensively for the Heat this weekend, and not much else there that in terms of scoring that wasn't initiated by him. I half expected him to make his entire team stay after and shoot baskets the way that he so often performatively does when he plays poorly. There's been a lot of surprise that Duncan Robinson, owner of a $90 million contract, hasn't seen more time considering the dearth of scoring that the Heat are dealing with right now? What do you make of that? And do you expect to see Robinson at some point in this series?
What was crazy is that he didn't even play in garbage time in Game 3 when they emptied their bench and put in everyone except Robinson. It was like a mafia rub out, right? Like it was like, what's going on here? You could see in the Atlanta series that they had a problem when they had Robinson and Hero on the floor at the same time, that it was just too easy to target one or the other. And if they were going to live with having one bad defending wing on the court, it was going to be Hero. That wasn't as much of an issue when they had Robinson in the starting lineup, but they basically found a better version of Robinson when they got Max Strus. And so he kind of pushed Robinson out of that role. I still think there are spots where they could have turned to him. They've been going with Gabe Vincent some. I think Robinson could help him more in those minutes, especially we'll see if Kyle Lowry plays, but if Lowry was on the floor already, or you had other ball handlers on the floor already, usually had either Lowry or Hero in the game, you can have Robinson out there, and I think he might give you more than Vincent would. But either way, I mean, even if he was playing, it would be in a diminished capacity, right? We're talking like 10 minutes as the eighth guy in the rotation. So bigger picture, and I wrote about this for The Athletic a couple weeks ago when it was apparent that Victor Oladipo was going to be taking his time, because that's the other thing that happened is Oladipo didn't play all year, and now he's become one of their core guys. Like you said, they're sitting on this $90 million deal. I think that and Miami's next 2 first-round picks on draft night becomes their bait for whatever star they go hunting for.
I have to ask you, as a former employee, front office person with the Memphis Grizzlies, what do you make of the way we are talking and that people are talking about that series now, with a number of notable hard fouls, starting with Draymond's ejection after the Brandon Clark foul and pull down, which some people called, I thought it was drastic but not unreasonable to eject Draymond there. Then, of course, you had the Dylan Brooks foul on Gary Payton II that sent Gary Payton II on the injured list, and who knows when we could see him again. And then, of course, Ja Morant's knee injury, which is being framed, by Taylor Jenkins, coach of the Memphis Grizzlies, and others, other voices within the Grizzlies, as being directly caused by Jordan Poole, pulling on his knee. What do you make of the tenor, the discussions around this series and that play in particular?
I mean, it's the playoffs, and this, this stuff is fun and everything, but the Jordan Poole play, that was just total suspension fishing to me. It was a nothing play. And then, to be fair, you had Warriors people online, Desmond Bane dove into Poole's legs.
Yeah.
It's no, he fell down. What are you talking about? We get series like this every year. This one was unusual because it started out physical right away. You had those incidents in the first 2 games, so the temperature's already turned up. And then you have Memphis's best player potentially not playing in Game 4 now, although they still won't say what's wrong with his knee.
Taylor Jenkins' quote is, I think it's likely that we probably won't see it. There's multiple adverbs in the sentence. It's unclear.
But it was the same thing when he was out at the end of the year. You know, it was just knee soreness, and it was damn, this thing's been sore for a while. Are we sure that's all that's going on there? So that whole thing's been a little odd too. So I just think there's a lot of gamesmanship underlying it that you usually see in these playoffs. And it would be unfortunate for Memphis though if Morant can't go, because he was the one thing, even as they were getting their butts kicked in Game 3, Golden State still didn't have a handle on him at all.
Do you guys feel like fans are really forcing these teams to hate each other when they just there's not a real rivalry? I feel like no one hates each other. They're just both wildly energetic and scrappy teams.
I think that's accurate. The hatred and whatever you want to call it, I think is much more at the fan level and at the, and then competitively, like these teams are doing what they're doing just to, try to get an advantage. But like, I don't see, like, there's not the personal level hate that, like, when we played the Clippers in 2013, like that was much more personal. Let's put it that way.
Go Google the choke slam, the famed Zebo choke slam. If for folks at home who want to get a taste of the viciousness of that particular series, which is super fun. Do you think if Kerr could go back in time, he would not say the code thing? Because I feel like that's whether he thinks that or not. Okay, I think that's the thing that kind of pushed the discourse a little into the overheated side. Like, it's one thing to say that was a reckless play and one that clearly got away from Dylan Brooks, and we are so saddened for GP, who is, been toiling on the fringes of the NBA and now found a home, and he's going to a free agency year. This is really devastating for him, yada, yada, yada. But I think to take it into the unwritten rules territory, it feels like that's, as fair or unfair as you think that is, I think that's the thing that pushed this all over the edge.
I think it did a little bit, because when people hear that, they think of baseball. I wrote about this in The Athletic today, but they think about, like, baseball managers, like, losing their shit over a sacrifice bunt or something. Like, no, there's an unwritten rule about that. You can't do that when the score is 8-3 in the 8th inning. And so I thought it actually, he lost his message a little bit when he said the code, rather than just talking about the fact that the scariest thing for any basketball player is to get hit from behind. You have no control over it. You're going full speed, and you're just going to land violently and hope nothing breaks.
The Memphis Grizzlies record without Ja this year, 16-2, quite good. On the other hand, they're playing a Warriors team that is not going to make mistakes in the way that the Minnesota Timberwolves made mistakes in the first round clash between Memphis and Minnesota that allowed Memphis to win that series. Assuming that Ja is out, which is unclear at this time, what do you see them doing? Where do they go for scoring?
That's probably the biggest question. They'll start Tyus Jones. They'll play Melton more. They'll have Dylan Brooks back. So defensively, they'll probably be more solid. I also wonder if they're going to bring back Steven Adams for Game 4 into the starting lineup. I mean, they're not really getting anything out of Tillman anyway. So I think you just have to try to go back and be that team you were in the regular season, even if Adams isn't maybe tailor-made defensively for going against Golden State. And then if he's starting, he's not on the floor when Poole is, who has been their biggest problem. So he doesn't have to worry about switching on to Poole. They'd have Clark in the game by then. So I do wonder if they do that. The biggest thing, I mean, not having Ja, you're going to lose stuff offensively. It's can you get it back at the defensive end by playing Jones more, playing Melton more, and just being more solid at that end, because that's Ja's biggest weakness. And that was one of the reasons that they were able to keep their heads above water when he was out of the lineup, is that the defense improved. So with all of that said, I just don't know how they're going to score enough without him. I think that's going to be a real problem. They're going to be counting on Brooks, who has not had a good playoffs, to be the Brooks that was averaging 25 against Utah last year. They need Jaren Jackson to stay hot from 3, and they need to, do this ensemble thing where 9 different guys score 8 points and they end up with a bunch that way.
If Jaren Jackson stays on the floor, if he can stay on the floor throughout his career, how good can he be?
All defense talent at the defensive end. I still think he can get to another level as a 3-point shooter. I mean, he shot in the low 30s this year.
Yeah.
The thing, his footwork is so good.
Yeah.
Like he can even, like for a big guy, like he can shoot coming off of pin downs and doing stuff that a lot of guys can't do. It's just the actual form with his arm sometimes it takes him astray. But you watch his feet, and you're like, oh my God. Yeah. I still think there's stuff he can get to there. And then the other big thing for him is he's all left off the bounce. And a lot of times when he does a show and go past the first, he doesn't see the second line of defense and he just trucks the help defender and picks up charging fouls that way. So for him to, I guess, have better court vision off the dribble when he does put it on the floor and have a better right hand would probably be the two biggest things for him offensively. Defensively, I think the sky is the limit for him. Even now, he picks up fouls in bunches, but they're not on defensive plays. He's not picking them up challenging shots at the rim. He's picking them up just to get his arm caught on somebody on a rebound or a random loose ball or, offensive fouls and just the most random, bizarre ways that have nothing to do with his defensive role.
Chris Paul, he's 37. He'll have a game where he goes 14-14. And then he will seemingly go into like a deep energy-saving hibernation for a number of games. How can the Phoenix Suns get more consistent play out of him? And what is going on with him? Like, has been weird to watch him the last several games just kind of not affect the Suns in the way that you're used to seeing him. Any idea what exactly the Mavs are doing, or is it just like this guy's 37 and he can't bring it at a super high level game after game?
The first 8 games of the playoffs, so the 6 games of the New Orleans series and the 2 of the Dallas, I think he had one bad game, and then the rest of the time he was awesome. So I thought he was having a tremendous playoffs up until these last 2 games, and then he hasn't quite been at that level, which I guess you'd sort of expect him to regress a little. I mean, him fouling out obviously was kind of a surprise, and the way he fouled out certainly. But he's never. I mean, Booker is the high volume guy in that team, and Paul has always played kind of the number 2 role in their offense. And sometimes he steps it up and picks his spots. Sometimes he, like you say, I mean, he kind of hibernates for a half or longer, and then dials it up in the fourth quarter. He wasn't really around for the fourth quarter yesterday, so he couldn't do that. But I just think that's his tempo, and that's how he plays now, and that's how he manages himself through a game. It just we didn't really get to see the second half Chris Paul yesterday because he had no second half. I think he played like 3 minutes total in the second half yesterday.
Well, and just going by when he was on the Rockets, it feels like though, say he doesn't bounce back from this, there's a bit of he feels like he conquered the mountain mid-series on some of these things. Do you think there's any possibility that that's a reality? That he almost peaks too early?
Oh, in a series? I'm trying to think. Man, I don't know. I mean, he peaks pretty late in that New Orleans series, right?
Yeah, that's true.
He shot 14 for 14 in the clincher. So I don't know. I mean, is there an element of teams figure out how to scheme him a little better as the series go on? There might be something to that, but I don't know. I just thought Phoenix had a tough couple of road games, and I still think they're going to end up winning that series.
Finally, John, for no apparent reason, I have to ask you.
Okay.
Tyus Jones, Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson. There's a number of young guards currently active in the NBA playoffs that have been linked with the New York Knicks for various reasons. The Knicks, notably, have been in need of a playmaker for something like 20 plus years. Is there anyone out there that is worth giving up some of the Knicks' young players for, and that can move the needle for that team? As a ball handler, as a perimeter threat.
To me, the scenario that makes the most sense is John Wall in a 1-year deal, right? Because I mean, the Knicks have set themselves up to go big game hunting, right? To use their
unfortunately, yes,
young players, draft picks, expiring contracts, whatever, to trade for somebody who is a who is a high wattage star. So to move some of that for somebody who does not move the needle for them in the meantime, I don't think really makes sense. Now, Donovan Mitchell's a different story, right? Like if he becomes actually available by trade, yeah, then the Knicks should go ahead, back up the truck and do that. But just to get somebody who is 10% better than having John Wall and Emmanuel Quickley, or Ricky Rubio and Emmanuel Quickley, like I have a hard time seeing that really being worth the trouble for them. Like even if they could get a sign and trade with Brunson, like they're probably giving up enough in that I'm not really sure it's worth it for them.
He is John Hollinger, national writer for The Athletic. John, thanks so much for joining Takeline. Enjoy the playoffs.
Thanks for having me on the show.